Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about total utility, marginal utility, and then what's called the law of diminishing marginal utility. So the first thing is, what is utility? It's this word that kind of sounds like utilize, kind of sounds like useful, and what it really means in economics is it's just that which we are seeking to maximize. So that sounds kind of vague, and intentionally so, because economists haven't really, they use utility as a tool for their theory, and they haven't really as in my experience, nailed down what it actually relates to in the real world. But for me, what makes sense to kind of substitute in whenever I hear utility is happiness. So think of happiness, or maybe well-being would be a better word even. So maybe another word could be well-being. But what we're talking about is that which, as humans, we want more and more of, no matter what. We always want to be happier, or we always want to be better off. So hopefully that makes a little sense. And now we need to talk about what the difference is between total and marginal. And this is done, in my opinion, it's much easier to see this with an example than it is by explaining it with words. So let's say that we can eat 0 pieces of candy, 1 piece of candy, 2 pieces of candy, 3 pieces of candy, 4, 5, or 6 pieces of candy. And let's say that candy is the only thing that makes us happy. So we don't need to worry about any other good, any other thing that we're doing. All that matters is, for this example, is how much candy we're eating. So if we have 0 pieces of candy, our total happiness is going to be 0. And our marginal utility, or our marginal happiness, we're just going to leave this blank for right now, and you'll see why in just 1 second. So now let's say that we get our first piece of candy, and this is like, it's the greatest thing ever, and our utility jumps up to, let's say we get 4 units of utility. And another thing I want to say about utility is it's measured in what are called utils. And again, a util is just a unit of utility. I've never heard it defined of what it actually is. So think of it as like a little bump on a happiness scale, maybe. I don't really know. Alright, so we have 4 utils of total utility. Now, marginal utility is, in this, well, in any context, it is the increase in utility from the last additional unit. So from the last additional unit. So in this case, when we only have 1 unit, 1 is our last additional unit. Sorry about that. So our marginal utility here is going to increase from, our marginal utility here is going to be 4, because our total utility increased from 0 to 4. So I want to write this out in a little bit more detail so you see what I'm actually doing to get this. So marginal utility, I guess kind of a general formula for it, is that it is new, I'm going to use T for total utility. So total utility new minus total utility that was old or before, divided by the new quantity minus the old quantity. Q sub new minus Q sub old. So in this example, that will be the new utility, the new total utility is 4, minus the old total utility was 0, over 1 minus 0. 1 minus 0. So this is the incremental benefit of 1 more unit of candy. So this is just equal to 4 minus 0 is 4, divided by 1 minus 0 is 1. So, and 4 divided by 1 is 4. So now you can see why I just put this slash right here for marginal utility, because there's no way to calculate the marginal utility of the first unit because you don't have anything before it. So if you have no units, you can't calculate a marginal utility. All right, so let's just keep on going with this example so you kind of get a better idea of how to do this calculation. So let's say that that second piece of candy is even better, and now we get, let's say that we jump up to 9 units of total utility. So then our marginal utility is going to be 9, the new total utility minus 4, the old total utility, over 2 minus 1, which is just equal to 1. So this is going to be 5. 9 minus 4 is 5, divided by 1 is equal to 5. So what that's saying is that our second candy bar made us even better off than our first candy bar. That because we jumped by 5 units of utility here for the second candy bar, that was an even more enjoyable candy bar than the first one. Now, how long do you think that that can go on? How long do you think that we can keep on eating candy bars and have it be better than the one before? My guess is that it stops at about 2 candy bars, because after that you start to get sick, you start to get full, your stomach starts to get upset. Things kind of go wrong after 2, in my opinion. So let's say now that total utility here goes up to 12. So we still enjoy this. Our total utility is still increasing, but it's not increasing as much. So now our marginal utility is going to be 12 units of utility when we have 3 pieces of candy, minus what we had before with 2 pieces of candy, which is 9, over 3 minus 2, which is just we got one more piece of candy. So that's equal to 3. So now you can see that we're starting to enjoy this. We enjoyed this candy bar, the third candy bar, less than we enjoyed the second one. And that is what is called the law of diminishing marginal utility. And I'm going to go ahead and do the 4th row before I talk about it in depth, so that we have just a little bit more to see what's going on. Alright, so let's say for the 4th row that we get, I don't know, let's say that we have 13 units of total utility from having the 4th candy bar. So now our marginal utility is going to be 13 minus 12 over 4 minus 3. And you can see that it's pretty easy to see that this was just, we increased total utility by 1, and because we add that one more piece of candy increased total utility by 1, we would expect our marginal utility to be 1. And in fact it is. 13 minus 12 is 1 over 4 minus 3, which is 1, and 1 divided by 1 is 1. Alright, so the law of diminishing marginal utility says that after some point in consumption, marginal utility will decrease. So let me say that one more time, that after some point in consumption, after some level in consumption, marginal utility will decrease. So what does that mean? It means that after some point, the next unit of consumption isn't going to be as good as the one before it. And then the unit after that isn't going to be as good as the one before that. So we're going to start enjoying this, whatever it is, less and less and less, the more and more and more that we consume it. And that seems to be realistic. It makes sense certainly with food. The more and more that you eat, the less and less that you want to eat more, and the less and less beneficial that food is for you. And it makes sense for a lot of other things. Definitely exercise. There's a lot of benefits to exercise, but once you're exhausted, then really it just kind of gets to be painful and difficult. It kind of seems to fit pretty well for a lot of different things. So that's what we start with in economics. Now I want to say one other thing in this video I want to say a couple other things actually. So first, in this example, the law of diminishing marginal utility sets in after the second unit of consumption. So right here, this pink line is where the law of diminishing marginal utility sets in. Because remember, we enjoyed the second piece of candy more than we enjoyed the first piece. Marginal utility increased from 4 to 5. But then it started to decrease, and it decreased from 5 to 3 and then 3 to 1. So after the second unit of consumption, after the second piece of candy, the law of diminishing marginal utility sets in. Now there's two other points that I really want to point out. And for the first one, I need to I'm going to go ahead and erase this and make this a 7. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do. And then we're going to go ahead and, actually, you know what? It would be much better if I went ahead and made this. So we're going to go like this. This is going to be 6, and this will be 7. Okay, so let's say if we have 6 pieces of candy, our total utility now is, I'm going to grab a different color. Let's say that it is 14. So what is our marginal utility? Well, our marginal utility here is going to be 14 minus 13. And we can see that there's just a jump of 1 in total utility here. But quantity here, all the other times we've been increasing quantity by 1. From 0 to 1, that's plus 1. From 1 to 2, that's plus 1. From 2 to 3, plus 1. And from 3 to 4, that's plus 1. But here, this is plus 2. So our quantity increased by 2. The number of candy bars we got increased by 2. And our total utility only increased by 1. So here, marginal utility is going to be a half. Each unit of candy bar gave us half a unit of total utility. And so here's how we're going to calculate it. Over 6 minus 4. And so this bottom is really the change in quantity. So here's a way I could say this. This is the change in total utility divided by the change in quantity is another way that I could write marginal utility. So this top part is the change in total utility, which is just 1. And the bottom part is the change in quantity, which is 2. Excuse me. So here we have that marginal utility per unit is 1/2. And that should make sense because we had 2 more pieces of candy and our total utility only went up by 1. So now you can see why I was messing around with the quantities over here so that I could make this really clear how to deal with a marginal utility if the quantity is increasing by more than 1. Alright, and the last thing that I want to say is that in economics we only are analyzing the decision when marginal utility is positive. And I'll go ahead and explain why with a little example. So let's say that this 7th candy bar makes us puke. So our total utility decreases from 14, and it's going to decrease kind of drastically. Let's say that it decreases all the way down to, I don't know, let's say 6. Okay, so now we're going to have 6 minus 14 over 7 minus 6. And this is equal to 6 minus 14 is negative 8. Over 1 is just negative 8. So I'll write that a little bit bigger. So in economics, we assume, and this is a big assumption, and it's definitely something that you need to take note of and understand, we assume that everyone is rational enough to never consume when marginal utility is negative. So we assume that you know your body well enough to say, oh, I don't want that 7th candy bar. I'm going to just go ahead and stop at 6. For 2 reasons. One, that 7th candy bar is going to cost you more money. So if you buy it, you're going to have less money. And also, it's going to make you sick, so you're going to be less happy, or you're going to have less utility. So we assume that marginal utility is positive and also decreasing past a point, which is the law of diminishing marginal utility. So you should understand the law of diminishing marginal utility. You should understand how to calculate total utility, how to calculate marginal utility from total utility, and also how to go, if you know that, let's say that marginal utility of the second good was 5, and total utility for the first good was 4, you should be able to know that we have to get from here to here, you're going to add 5. So you need to be able to go given marginal utility and the prior total utility to the next total utility, which you just add the marginal utility multiplied by the number, by the increase in quantity, which here is just 1. So that last part was a little quick. If you don't get that, let me know and I'll do another video, but I feel like this one's run kind of long.